Christmas arrived softly in Connemara, not with bells or busy streets, but with mist rolling gently over the hills and the sound of the sea breathing far below. The cottages stood still beneath a pale winter sky, their windows glowing warm against the cold, as if each one was holding a small secret of comfort inside. There were no crowds here, no rushing footsteps, no loud celebrations spilling into the night, just peat fires crackling low, sheep resting in open fields, and the wind moving slowly across stone walls that had seen many quiet winters before. You arrived as evening settled in, carrying only what you needed, a coat, a tired heart, and a wish for peace. The air smelled of salt and smoke, familiar and calming, like something remembered from long ago. Inside the cottage, candles flickered gently. A simple Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated not with glitter, but with handmade ornaments and soft lights that didn't try to shine up brightly. Outside, the world slowed even more. Snow did not fall. Instead, rain whispered against the windows, and the ocean hummed its steady lullaby in the distance. This was a Christmas without noise, without expectations, without hurry. And as the quiet wrapped itself around Connemara, you felt something warm settle inside you, the kind of peace that only comes when nothing is asked of you at all. Tonight, Christmas would be simple, and Christmas morning in Connemara did not begin with bells. There were no carols echoing down crowded streets, no shop windows glowing bright with hurry and promise. Instead, the day arrived slowly, carried in on a pale gray sky and a soft wind rolling in from the Atlantic. You woke to silence, not the empty kind, but the gentle silence that feels alive, filled with distant waves, the quiet breathing of the land, and the low crackle of a peat fire that had burned through the night. For a moment, you stayed still beneath the heavy wool blanket, listening. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the window, unbothered, unhurried. Somewhere far away, a sheep called once, then fell quiet again. The cottage held the warmth close, its stone walls thick and steady, as if they had been built for mornings like this. You sat up slowly. The room was small, but welcoming. A wooden table, 2 chairs, a bookshelf with well-worn spines. In the corner stood a modest Christmas tree, no taller than you, decorated with simple ornaments, bits of ribbon, dried orange slices, and a few soft lights glowing like tiny stars. Nothing glittered, nothing shouted. Everything rested. You pulled on a thick sweater and stepped onto the cold stone floor. The chill under your feet reminded you where you were, far from noise, far from obligation, far from the kind of Christmas that demanded cheer. In the kitchen, the kettle waited patiently on the stove. You filled it with water and set it to heat. The sound was comforting, familiar. Soon, steam rose, fogging the small window above the sink. As the kettle warmed, you looked outside. The hills of Connemara stretched wide and quiet, their shapes softened by mist. Stone walls traced gentle lines across the land, disappearing into gray. The sea was barely visible, but you could hear it, steady, calm, endless. You poured hot water over tea leaves and wrapped your hands around the mug. The warmth seeped into your fingers, then into your chest. This Christmas felt different. There was no list to complete, no one waiting for you to arrive, no clock reminding you of what came next. Just time. After breakfast, a simple slice of bread, butter melting slowly, and tea. You pulled on your coat and stepped outside. The air was cool and clean. Rain fell lightly, not enough to soak, just enough to remind the land that it was winter. Your breath showed faintly as you walked. The path from the cottage led toward the hills. It wasn't a road, not really, just a worn track through grass and stone, shaped by years of quiet footsteps. You walked slowly, each step felt intentional, but not planned. The wind brushed your face gently, carrying the scent of sea and earth. The land around you seemed to hold its breath, as if respecting the stillness of the day. You passed a small field where sheep stood close together, unmoving. They watched you with calm, curious eyes, then returned to their own thoughts. Further along, you reached a stone wall and rested your hands on its cold surface. The stones were rough, solid, steady, older than any memory you carried with you. You closed your eyes for a moment. You let the sounds of Connemara fill you, the wind, the distant sea, the soft rain. No music could have been more fitting. When you returned to the cottage, your cheeks were cool and your body pleasantly tired. Inside, the fire had settled into glowing embers, casting a warm orange light across the room. You added a small piece of peat and watched the flames rise slowly, then calm again. Time moved differently here. Hours passed without being counted. You read a few pages of a book, then set it aside. You sat by the window and watched the rain blur the hills. You let your thoughts wander, not racing, not pressing, just drifting. At midday, you prepared a simple meal. Soup warmed gently on the stove, bread sliced thick. Everything tasted better when eaten slowly, when nothing waited on the other side of the meal. Outside, the light began to fade, though it was still early. Winter days here were short, and darkness came softly like a familiar guest. You lit candles as evening approached. Their flames flickered gently, reflected in the window glass. The Christmas tree lights glowed quietly, never asking for attention. As night settled over Connemara, the rain grew steadier. The wind hummed low against the cottage walls. Inside, the warmth held. You sat near the fire, wrapped in a blanket, and felt something loosen inside you, a tension you hadn't noticed before. A weight you'd been carrying quietly. Here, there was room to set it down. This Christmas was not about celebration. It was about rest. About being held by quiet. About letting the world slow enough for your heart to catch up. Outside, Connemara slept beneath cloud and rain. Inside, the cottage glowed gently, and you felt ready, not for festivities, not for noise, but for something deeper. A quiet Christmas, a healing one. And as the fire burned low and the night grew long, you knew this was only the beginning. Bull, you would learn, was more than enough. The evening settled gently over Connemara, as if the land itself were easing into rest. Darkness didn't fall all at once. It arrived slowly, carried in by the mist and the soft rhythm of rain against stone. Inside the cottage, the fire glowed low and steady. The flames no longer danced, they breathed. Each small movement of light felt calm and patient, like it had nowhere else to be. You sat back in the chair, wrapped in a thick blanket, listening. The wind moved along the walls. The rain whispered against the window. The sea spoke in a distant, steady voice. This was Christmas Eve, and it felt nothing like the ones you remembered. There were no last-minute errands, no crowded rooms, no forced cheer. Just quiet. You stood and placed another candle on the table, lighting it slowly. The warm glow softened the room even more. Shadows rested in the corners without fear, like they belonged there. In the small kitchen, you prepared a simple supper, nothing elaborate. A warm dish, bread, and tea. You moved slowly, enjoying the sound of each small action, the clink of a spoon, the gentle bubbling on the stove. When you sat down to eat, you noticed how peaceful it felt to dine alone, without loneliness. The quiet did not feel empty. It felt full of presence, full of being. Afterward, you washed the dishes and dried them carefully, then returned to the fire. Outside, the rain eased. The wind softened. The night grew deeper. You opened the door briefly and stepped outside. Cold air touched your face, clean and sharp. The sky was dark, but not black. Clouds moved slowly, revealing small breaks of silver moonlight. Somewhere beyond the hills, the sea continued its endless rhythm. You stood still, breathing in the night. This place asked nothing of you. Inside again, you prepared for bed. You folded clothes neatly, placed your shoes by the door, and smoothed the blanket. Each movement felt meaningful, even though nothing important was happening. That, you realized, was the gift. You climbed into bed and turned off the lamp. The room glowed softly with candlelight and the faint twinkle of the tree. As you lay there, your thoughts drifted to Christmases past. Busy tables, loud laughter, expectations layered thickly over the day. This Christmas was different. This Christmas was quiet enough to hear yourself think, and then quiet enough to let thinking go. Your breathing slowed in out. The fire popped once, then settled again. Outside, Connemara slept beneath cloud and stone and sea. And somewhere between waking and dreaming, you felt a gentle warmth spread through you. Not excitement, not joy in the loud sense, but something deeper. Contentment. Peace. The kind of calm that stays long after the lights are turned off. Christmas Eve passed quietly in Connemara, and sleep came softly, like a promise kept. Christmas morning arrived, wrapped in mist. You woke before the light fully reached the windows, not startled, not rushed, but gently, as if the day had tapped softly on your shoulder. It waited patiently for you to notice. The cottage was still warm from the fire that had burned low through the night, and the air carried the faint scent of peat and pine. For a moment, you stayed in bed, listening. The rain had stopped. The wind had softened. The world felt paused. Outside, Connemara rested under a pale gray sky. The hills were barely visible, their shapes blurred by mist that moved slowly, like breath. It felt as though the land itself was still half asleep. still half asleep. You rose quietly and wrapped yourself in a sweater. The floor was cold beneath your feet, but it grounded you, reminding you that you were here, fully here. In the kitchen, you lit the kettle and watched steam rise, curling gently toward the ceiling. The small Christmas tree glowed faintly in the corner, its light still on from the night before, steady and comforting. There was no rush to begin the day. You poured tea and carried your mug to the window. The sea was quieter than usual, its voice distant and calm. A single bird crossed the sky, then disappeared into the mist. This Christmas morning felt sacred in its simplicity. You ate slowly. Warm bread, butter, a bit of honey, tasting each bite, feeling thankful without needing a reason. Gratitude came easily here, without effort or expectation. After breakfast, you stepped outside. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the smell of wet grass and stone. Droplets clung to the edges of leaves and fences, catching what little light there was. You walked toward the hills again, following the same quiet path. Your footsteps were soft against the damp ground. Sheep grazed nearby, unmothered. They were dotted with moisture. You paused at the stone wall and rested your hands on it once more. The stones felt cold and steady, unchanged by the passing of days and seasons. Standing there, you felt something settle deep inside you. This Christmas was not about receiving. It was about being present. You continued walking until the path gently turned back toward the cottage. The mist began to lift slightly, revealing more of the hills. Their greens and grays muted but beautiful. By the time you returned, the light had grown stronger. The cottage looked especially welcoming now, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. Inside, you added wood to the fire and let it warm the space again. You spent the late morning reading, then simply sitting, letting the quiet do what it did best. Time passed without marking itself. At midday, you prepared another simple meal. Soup simmered gently, filling the cottage with warmth. You ate by the window, watching the mist continue to thin, the world slowly waking. The afternoon drifted by like a long exhale. You wrote a few lines in a notebook, nothing important, just thoughts, observations, feelings that felt safe to surface here. Then you closed the notebook and set it aside. Later, you walked again, this time not far, just enough to feel the air on your face. The sea had grown slightly louder now, its rhythm steady and reassuring. As evening approached, the sky darkened. Once more, you returned to the cottage and lit the candles again, welcoming the night as an old friend. Dinner was quiet and comforting. Afterward, you sat near the fire, listening to its gentle crackle. This Christmas day had given you something rare. Space to breathe, space to feel, space to rest without guilt. Outside, the first stars appeared faintly as clouds drifted apart. Inside, warmth held steady. And as Christmas night settled over Connemara, you felt complete, not because something special had happened, but because nothing had needed to. In the quiet glow of candlelight and fire, you understood, sometimes, the most heartwarming Christmas is the one that asks for nothing at all. The night after Christmas felt even quieter than the ones before it, as though the land had settled deeper into itself now that the day had passed. There was no sense of celebration ending, no feeling of something slipping away. Instead, Connemara seemed to breathe more slowly, satisfied, content. You sat by the fire as the last of the evening light faded from the sky outside the window. The hills were now only darker shapes against the night, and the sea could be heard more clearly, its steady rhythm like a calm heartbeat. The fire burned low, glowing rather than dancing. You added one small piece of peat, watching as the flames lifted briefly and then softened again. There was something comforting in that rhythm, a rise, a fall, and then rest. You wrapped the blanket tight around your shoulders and let your thoughts wander without direction. This place had a way of loosening time. Minutes stretched gently into hours. The pressure you once felt to fill silence with activity had faded completely. Silence here felt like company. You noticed how your body responded to it. Your shoulders stayed relaxed. Your breathing remained slow. Your jaw rested easily, no longer clenched by habit. Even your thoughts had changed. They no longer rushed forward or circled the same worries. They arrived quietly, stayed briefly, and then drifted away like birds, passing through the mist. Eventually, you stood and moved about the cottage, tidying without purpose, straightening a chair, placing a mug back on its shelf. These small actions felt grounding, gentle, like a conversation with the space around you. When you stepped outside for a moment, the air was cold and clean. The sky had cleared enough to reveal a scattering of stars. They didn't shine sharply, they glowed softly, blurred slightly by thin clouds moving slowly overhead. You listened. No engines, no distant voices, only wind, sea, and the faint sound of grass shifting in the dark. It felt as though the world had given itself permission to rest. Back inside, you prepared for sleep without hurry. You washed your hands in warm water, the sound of it running. Calm and steady, you folded your clothes neatly and placed them on the chair. You blew out the candles one by one, watching thin trails of smoke rise and disappear. The Christmas tree lights remain on, glowing gently in the corner, their reflection soft against the stone walls. You lay down and pulled the blanket up. Feeling its familiar weight settle over you, the bed creaked slightly, then went still, as if it were ready to sleep. For a while, you remained awake, simply listening. The fire shifted quietly. The wind brushed past the cottage. The sea continued its endless song. Your breathing slowed naturally, falling into rhythm with the sounds around you. In your mind, images drifted through: the misty hills, the stone walls, the sheep in the fields, the quiet paths you had walked. None of them demanded attention. They were gentle, unchanging, safe. Sleep did not rush toward you. It approached slowly, respectfully. Like everything else in Connemara, your thoughts softened first, losing their sharp edges. Then your body followed, sinking deeper into rest. Muscles loosened, limbs grew heavy in the most comfortable way. At some point, you slipped fully into sleep, wrapped in warmth and quiet. The night passed without disturbance. When you stirred again, it was only briefly, a half-waking moment where you turned onto your side and felt the steady calm still present. Even in sleep, the peace held you. By morning, you felt rested in a way that went beyond physical sleep. Something deeper had been restored. Consciousness returned slowly. The sky outside was pale once more, the light soft and forgiving. The cottage felt calm, unchanged, as though it had stood watch through the night. You lay still for a moment, smiling slightly. This Christmas had given you no grand memories to recount, no stories filled with noise or spectacle. Instead, it had given you something quieter and far more lasting: a sense of ease, a feeling of being held by stillness, a reminder that peace does not need to be earned. As you rose and began another gentle morning in Connemara, you knew that this quiet Christmas would stay with you long after you left, not as a moment in time, but as a way of being. And that, you realized, was the true gift Christmas came to Connemara. Without noise or hurry, it arrived the way the mist does, slowly, gently, and without asking to be noticed. The hills rested beneath a soft gray sky, their edges blurred by drifting cloud, as if the land itself had decided to sleep in a little longer. There were no crowded streets here, no flashing lights, no music spilling from open doors, just stone cottages standing quietly against the wind, their windows glowing warm in the early dark, promising comfort and calm inside. The sea breathed steadily in the distance, its rhythm slow and reassuring. The wind moved across the fields and along old stone walls that had witnessed countless winters, each one quieter than the last. You arrived with little more than a bag and a tired heart, the kind of tired that comes not from walking afar, but from carrying too much. Connemara did not ask questions. It did not expect cheer or celebration. It simply made space. Inside the cottage, a peat fire burned low. Candles flickered softly, their light dancing across stone walls. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated simply, its lights glowing like quiet stars. Outside, rain whispered against the windows, and the hills faded into shadow. Time slowed, thoughts softened, breathing deepened without effort. This was not a Christmas of lists and plans, not a Christmas of noise and obligation. This was a Christmas where nothing was required of you. As the quiet wrapped itself around the land, you felt something gentle settle within you, a sense of peace you hadn't realized you were missing. Here, in the still heart of Connemara, Christmas was not something to perform. It was something to rest inside. And as the night deepened and the fire burned low, you understood that this quiet Christmas might be the warmest one of all.